Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Al-Nikah Diaries, and this month's installment is titled 19 and Divorced. So let's get into it, inshallah. So we took a call probably a couple of years ago now from a young lady, roughly 19 years old or so, she said, and saying that she wants to get married. Right? She's found a chap. They've been in a relationship for a while, not years and years and years, but for several months, and she wants to get married. So we go through our preliminary checks. We ask the lady, listen, is there anything that we need to know about? Parental consent, family supportive? She goes, there's nothing sinister going on. I'm not pregnant or anything like that. However, parents aren't supportive, so we'd want to get married without their knowledge or indeed consent. Now, here we generally tend to probe a little bit further. That listen, okay, why aren't your family involved? This is a significant undertaking, and it's a milestone in many respects for lots of people. And generally, families tend to be there often in celebration. So, why does your family not want to be there? Why they're not part of it? Why you're not inviting them? And she goes, like, listen, I had tried to have a conversation with my parents about getting married. They dismissed it, and I've been in a relationship with this guy. I want to move forward. I don't want my life to be held up because they're saying no. There's no religious reason why, I can't get married to this guy, and I want to marry him. I love him. I can see myself settling down with him. And we thought, right, okay. And part of me was thinking, oh dear, she's not really thought this through. And sometimes, parents and people that are really close to you can understand the errors in your logic and try and protect you from mistakes that you will make going down a particular way. Not always successful, right, in doing so, because people don't like to be challenged, and often, depending upon who it is, they don't like to receive criticism or critical feedback. And I suspect this young lady was that way inclined because she was dismissing the perspective of her parents, who said that, listen, focus on your education, get yourself I suppose established to a degree, and then you can start looking at marriage. You're 19 years old, you're very young. Similar kind of conversation that I had with her, but she was like, no, listen, I don't want to do anything silly with this guy. I want to be in a halal relationship with him, and again, I can see myself settling down with him. So we went down the whole line of, listen, what would you do if? What would you do if? What if you get married and get you fall pregnant? What about all the plans that you've got and all the rest of it? And she seemed to have a response for everything, which tells me that she was already invested in this decision and going down this path, contrary to our counsel. So we said to her after the whole conversation, right? We asked her the general question: like, listen, are your parents? What's your relationship like with them? Are they malicious to you? Are they, kind of intent on seeing bad for you? And she goes, no, I've got a great relationship with my parents. They don't want to see bad or ill for me or of me. But this is a decision that we just can't agree on. And on that basis, we said to this young lady that, listen, we don't think it's the right decision for you to make. We think that your parents might have a legitimate objection, and I think that you need to hear that. Listen to it as opposed to hearing, and I think you need to acknowledge it. And if you're serious about this guy, and if this guy's serious about you, give it time. Let him establish himself the way that your parents perhaps want to see, and he can come back when the time's right, and he's more, I suppose, more of a suitable candidate in the eyes of your parents. So we advised her against it, and we said that, listen, we won't perform the nikah, and we don't advise you to do this, right? Because we've seen too many young ladies, particularly young ladies, go down this road and end up in heartache, heartbreak, carrying all sorts of emotional scars, trauma, and baggage, which they can't put down. And especially if you're trying to do something like this, right, on the sneak, without telling your parents, without telling your family, without telling your friends, just, what, on the low key, we'll get married, and it will be fine. It's just fraught with problems. So we said, no, we're not going to do it, and we don't advise you to do it. And that was the end of the conversation. Also, we thought. So, and often people don't call us back when we refuse them, right? Unless there's something particular that we've touched on in a conversation, they won't call us back. However, this young lady did, and it was about 12, maybe 14 months after our initial call. She calls us, and she's in an absolute state, right? Really, really, really emotionally. I'm going to say compromised, but really emotional on the phone to us. And she goes, brother, I called you. about a year ago, and I said that I wanted to get married. And I go, yeah, I remember the conversation, right? Tell me what's happened. She goes, well, I married him, and I thought, right, okay. And she goes, before we were married, right, it was always there. He always, on the phone for hours. We'd meet up, whisper these kind of sweet nothings to me, and we'd make our plans together. This is what we do when we get married, and all of that kind of stuff. And when she was telling me that, I thought, right, I can see where this is going. And she goes, after we got married a few months later, right, it started to change. It became a little bit more distant towards me. And, over a period of time, would see that, listen, he's not as in contact with me as he was before. He wasn't always there, and some of this is probably, you can expect that as you get married, right, the dynamics change a little bit in a relationship. You go from being, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it is, to husband and wife. You live in each other's space. And this was the interesting thing as well, actually. They weren't living in each other's space, because even though they'd got married, they hadn't told their parents, right? They were still living in their parents' houses. So he was living with his parents, she was living with her parents, right? And they were married, and they'd see each other, and they'd meet up, and they were halal for each other to be in each other's company, right? And that was the premise upon which she wanted to get married in the first place, that we want our relationship and our engagements to be halal. But she was saying that, listen, it seems to have changed with me now. It's been several months, right? And now he's distant. He doesn't pick up my calls. He doesn't respond to my texts. If he does respond, it's short, one-word responses. Yeah, busy. No, I can't meet up. Whatever it might be, right? He's not the same guy, right, that I married. And bear in mind, this has only been a period of about 12, 13 months at the most. And I sat there and I listened to her, and I go, okay, so what are you going to do? She goes, brother, I really don't know what to do. And I hate to say it, but we had to have a bit of a "I told you so" moment. And this is probably the reason why your parents didn't want you marrying this individual, whether they had this conversation with him or not, but because they know that there's more to marriage than what arguably this young lad was interested in, which is just the physical part of it, which is just the sex. And once that kind of novelty is worn off, and he's had his fill, it sounds as though this guy's moved on, or just not interested anymore. Moved on, not necessarily has found anybody else, but you know what, I've had my fill of you. I'm not really interested in you that way anymore. And it feels as though that's the way that this conversation went, in relation to the relationship that this young lady had with her husband. Just completely detached, distant, not interested anymore. All those sweet nothings amounted to essentially that nothing. Those promises, those conversations, the long life plans that they have, she was watching crumbling before her eyes. And this is what the real difficult part of it is, because she'd gone into this relationship without any support from her family or her friends. There was nobody else that she could lean on. There was nobody that she could talk to. She was suffering in absolute silence. All of this trauma, everything that she's invested, and she loved him. You could tell the way that she was talking. She'd invested absolutely everything into this guy, and she loved him with every fiber of her being. And then to have that crumble at in front of your eyes, but knowing that you've now made a wrong decision, contrary to the consent, or the knowledge or the well wishes of your parents. How do you manage that emotionally? How do you deal with that? And this is the difficult part that she was having. So then we have to talk her through the processes of looking to get the marriage annulled, so you can move on and draw a clinical line underneath it, as though that's possible. But precisely that, how do you at such a young age take on a huge commitment like that, someone that you've invested absolutely everything into, and then when it doesn't work out, how do you then just put all of those bags down and say that, right, okay, well, it never worked out with him, well, let's close that chapter and move on to the next. The human condition doesn't work like that. She loved him at a given moment in time, invested everything into him, gave him herself, right? And then for him to say that, right, actually, I'm not really interested anymore, and not even be man enough to say that to her, but rather demonstrate that through his conduct, or the lack of his conduct, right? And that's a realization for her to dawn upon, hoping day by day that maybe it will get better, but then draw the realization that actually it's never going to get better. To pick up the phone to me, that would be the realization having dawned upon her that this guy isn't interested, and probably was never interested in me the way that I was with him. How do you heal from something like that? How do you put those bags down? How do you allow that scar to heal from that trauma to then go into another relationship? and successfully make it work. It's so difficult, so difficult. 19 and divorced, a horrible position to be in, but one that so many of our children find themselves in. May Allah protect us all, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.